Cashamaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to GeoGearHeads. This is episode 338. And today we're going to talk about cruise caching. Not just the first time, not for the second time, but for the third. And speaking of thirds, Daryl, there's something a little different tonight. Well, maybe it's someone a little different.
Yeah, I was going to say we normally have a guest, but Subway Mark is back once again. This is what, your fourth time, I think, with us?
Something like that. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. It's good to be
Fifth
back.
time you get a jacket.
Ooh, is it? Where is it?
Well, this is only your fourth time.
Oh,
We still have to get them made. And the interesting thing is Patreon just bought a company that does all kinds of swag stuff. So we might have
Ooh.
some good options coming with that in the near future. We're crossing our fingers.
What if it's a
That's-
t-shirt instead of a jacket?
sure.
I'm hoping for, some nice dye sublimation done t-shirts, but
Ooh.
still haven't found someone who can do them affordably,
Yeah.
in good quality. The custom done stuff has been kind of troublesome, and that can do them internationally, because that's the other piece we need.
That's the key right there.
Yeah. So it's been a task that is still on the agenda and hasn't gotten completed because, well, right now there's only one option that I've found that I don't like very much. Yeah. Anyway, so welcome back again, Mark. We're going to be
Thanks.
talking today about cruise caching. And this is something that we talked about quite a while ago with you back on the 132.
Wow, that long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been several years.
Wait, 132?
Yeah, episode 132 was Cruise Caching 2.
That was almost exactly 200 episodes ago.
Very close.
How much is that in dog years?
Well, it's
864.
almost 4 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah,
Now I got to go and look up the date because
Yeah, it would
it
be.
seems like it's about 4 years ago.
it would be about 4 years ago because it was after I came back from the Panama Canal cruise. So that'd be
Yeah.
about right.
Yeah, and now you've got a whole bunch
That's-
more stuff.
July 12th, 2014.
There we go.
There you go.
So, yep, almost 4 years ago that we talked last, and that's the last time we talked about cruise caching.
But a lot of things have happened since then.
They have. And I know a lot more people are looking to do the cruises, especially like that Alaska cruise. But you've done a ton more cruises since then. So why don't you give us a rundown of your experiences and what cruises you have been on since forever, since people probably hadn't a recollection of that original episode.
4 years ago.
Yeah, it's 4 years ago. I can't remember what I ate for dinner yesterday, let alone...
Exactly.
You got to eat dinner yesterday? Wow.
I did, but it was not very good, which is why I tried to forget it.
I got you. Okay.
It was food truck dinner, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
some food trucks are good.
Yeah.
I will.
Don't get me wrong. There's some food trucks that are very good. But Mark, we're not talking about food trucks unless they have them on the cruise ships.
They might.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Or they're waiting for you at port. So
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I think 4 years ago, like I said, I think we talked about my Panama Canal cruise, starting in Florida and going through the canal, ended up in San Diego. But since then, the following year, we went on a Norwegian fjords cruise. So that's where we left out of Copenhagen and went up to Norway and went up a couple of fjords, and it was a beautiful trip. Came back, and then we hopped on a train from Copenhagen and went up to Stockholm. As an extended trip, because that's always nice. You're already in Europe, so you might as well do something else.
So
That-
with that, you only used one type of car, a Fjord?
Yeah, it was a Ford Model J.
Okay. Oh, well done. You got me with that one. You win.
Other cruises, so my mom turned 70, and so for her 70th birthday, we took her on a cruise from New York to Bermuda, which the ship actually spent overnight in Bermuda. So we actually spent quite a bit of time in Bermuda, which was kind of cool. And then for my 50th birthday, we went on a Caribbean cruise. And the reason why is because I did a Caribbean cruise many years ago on my first cruise, and I went to St. Martin, but never went to the Juliana Airport to Maho Beach to see the planes land. So that was kind of a bucket list. So I had to go back to see St. Martin and drink beer watching big planes land, which is kind of awesome. And then the last cruise I did, which was June of last year, was Alaska cruise, leaving from Vancouver, going up to Alaska. It was a one-way, ending up in Seward, Alaska, and then we did a land tour that went all the way up to Fairbanks. So that was
the land tour, I'm assuming, was by bus?
By bus and train. So we took a bus up to Denali and then a train from Denali to Fairbanks, which was probably the best food I've ever had was on that train, ever.
So really the only thing you were missing from that trip was the seaplane.
Yeah, we were actually supposed to do one in Ketchikan, but unfortunately, the rain and weather, the pilot was like, "Nah, you wouldn't enjoy the ride." So I trust his judgment.
Yeah, always a good thing to do.
Exactly.
So it sounds like a few good trips. I really would love to do the fjords. That one sounds really cool. And of course, Alaska seems to be one that like all geocachers want to do.
Yeah, a lot of people said we should have done Alaska first and then Norway, because they said you'll be kind of let down going to Alaska after going to the Norwegian fjords, but they're different enough. It's like they're both spectacular in their own right. So, and the cruise ship went up this nice fjord to Geiranger, which was at the very end of the fjord, and it was just a beautiful 2-hour boat on the ship going up this narrow fjord. And then we got let off and got to see everything. Of course, there's geocaches everywhere, so I have to do geocache.
What?
I know.
So what are some of the highlights of that Norwegian cruise? Any good sightseeing that people should look out for, or maybe some really cool caches that you found?
Well, first of all, since it left out of Copenhagen, one of the things you got to do in Copenhagen is, one, you got to see the Little Mermaid, that's statue that's in the waterway, and that's also, I believe that was a virtual cache, and there's also real caches right around it. And then you got to go to Tivoli Gardens, which is an amusement park that Walt Disney had went to and got this inspiration for Disneyland. It was from Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, so that's definitely a worthwhile. And then the city itself is just a beautiful city. And then we went to Stavanger first, was our first stop, and there was some caches there, but it was pouring down rain. But I was insisted that I have to get a cache at every port. I don't care how much rain there is. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. It's okay. Although
you didn't even have an umbrella, did you?
No, but we wound up getting one because it was deluge rain. But we even took a little boat tour that went up another fjord from there, a small fast boat, which we all got soaked on, but it was still awesome in itself. I mean, you're there, you might as well go.
Exactly.
And our next stop after Stavanger was Bergen, Norway, which is a beautiful city. It's a small city famous because it was part of the Hanseatic League, so it has the old German waterfront from the Hanseatic time period. And then the funicular goes up to the top of the mountain. And so there's geocaches all the way on the park, all the way around on the top of the mountain of the funicular that you really need to do. There's also a light rail system, which I had to ride, but my wife decided, no, she's heading back to the ship. But definitely Bergen, it was probably my favorite small city on that tour. The next up was Allison, which is famous for its Art Deco architecture, but there was also some areas called open air museums. So basically, a museum with a bunch of old buildings, collected and made to look like another time period. and that was a really cool museum to walk through. And there was geocaches right outside it, of course. And then the final main stop of the trip was in Geiranger at the end of the fjord, which is a UNESCO heritage or UNESCO site. I'm not sure it's a heritage site, but it's a beautiful. It's a really tiny town. I mean, there's definitely more people on the ship than live in this town. I think the town is like 200 people, and the ship had like 3,000. So
Yeah.
And we were lucky we were the only ship at port that day. And what makes Geiranger really neat is they have this moving arm for a dock, so that the dock is against the land. And then when the ship comes in, the ship can't get that close to the land, so the dock moves out in a Z motion, and then lands right against the ship.
Oh,
it was kind of
cool.
Nice.
It was cool to watch that. And since we're the only ship, we had the right to use that. I've seen pictures of Geiranger when there's 4 or 5 ships in port, and like, how can that town handle that? I have no idea.
Wow.
But we took a hop on, hop off bus that went up hills on either side of the port, and I literally had all the geocaches loaded in my GPS and that were there. And it's like, oh, there's a geocache there. Pretty awesome. Grab it. So it worked out pretty well. And the views are just, you can't beat the views of when you're at the top of a hill looking down at the fjord, and you see your ship, which looks like a tiny dot, but the fjord itself is just beautiful in the background.
Nice.
In the chat, Katie8HWG wanted to know if the cruise lines know about geocaching.
So whether they know, I don't think they necessarily know about geocaching, although they might. Some cruise member does. Sometimes when I did the Panama Canal trip, I actually posted there's a community board inside the ship, and I posted a thing, geocache and meet and greet at a port. So I mean, you're welcome to do that to encourage geocaches to either meet at a port or meet on board ship. For Panama Canal, I actually published an event to Guatemala for that. Although since it was at port, I don't think you can publish that kind of a geocache anymore because it was actually behind security.
Right. Yeah, that's no longer allowed under the current guidelines.
Right. But meet and greets you can do on board ship, just can't be an official event. That's all.
Right.
Did anybody show up?
Yeah, no one from Guatemala did, but yes, people from the ship did. So
okay, so there were other fellow geocachers on the boat with you,
right? And one reason why I held an event there is because I looked at what we were doing in Guatemala, and there was no geocaches along our route, except for one that was in one city, but we weren't going there. And all these other geocachers that were on board ships, like, thank you for holding an event. Now we can claim Guatemala.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it was all about.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't.
Well, and what's probably more important is that there are cruises that you can go on that are geocaching cruises, and you've got travel agents or other tour operators who will actually put these together, complete with the buses or whatever transportation is needed to get you off the ship and do the cruises. And that's how a lot of the geocachers have done the Alaska cruises on one of the geocaching cruises, but they have them all over the place.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do them, but it just doesn't work out. I think Landshark puts those together.
Exactly. That's who I was going to tell you to go to.
Yeah. Landsharks with a Z.
Or a Z, as they prefer.
Or a Z.
If you like to,
our checks in the mail, by the way, Chris. Our checks in the mail from Landsharks.
Okay, good. Yeah, if you Google Landsharks, one of the first suggestions that come up is Landshark Cruises. So they're doing the Caribbean in 2019, and the Baltic cruise that they're planning this year is already sold out.
Well, and there were
optional stop at Iceland.
Yeah,
there were at least one or two other travel agents at Geo Woodstock with the cruise options, but they also do some of the similar tours that don't require the boat. So I want to say one of them was to like Costa Rica or something like that, where it was just a geocaching trip. So you'd go to Costa Rica, you hit, some caches in, the country, and then you come back.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the all-inclusive, stay at the resort, all the transportation's included, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And that's kind of the nice thing about most of those cruise packages is it includes almost everything that you're going to need do your basic stuff, because the food's included with most of those. The transportation is included if that's what you're doing on the geocaching one. But if you don't do one of those geocaching ones, you may have to incur additional expenses like getting a taxi.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of advantage of doing a group, and especially if you're afraid of making that level of detail planning too. It's much better to let someone else do it.
Yeah, and like Landsharks will give you the GPX file for all of the caches that are in the area, whether you're doing them or not, so that if you want to go off on your own, you can do it that way.
Yep.
Well, Mark, that brings up the point of, okay, so you've done these cruises and you claim you've done geocaching. I'm going to go with that. How did you get from the boat to the geocache? I mean, what was the preferred method of transport? Or did you just happen to say, hey, I'm out and about in the town, I'm going to go find something? Or did you make geocaches a destination?
So it was a little bit of everything. So what I tend to do when I travel on cruises is I downloaded caches of everywhere where I think I might be in that port. Or if I'm taking a land tour through the ship or through a third party, I'd try to guess where we're going to go and try to make sure I have caches loaded. So some of our cache by opportunity. It's like, we happen to be here, and there happens to be one on my GPS. Let's go for it. But I also, especially if we're in a port all day and tours are only half a day, my wife usually decides I'm going back to the ship and go to sleep. I'll walk through the town and get caches, and then that's the destination at that point.
Okay, so go ahead.
And that's what I like to do. My wife will tolerate if it's a place where she wants to go. So, but at some point it's like, okay, you go play.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So they're just, well, as you say, caches of opportunity.
Unless I already pre-built my free time into it, then it's cache by destination.
Okay, and so let's. I'm going to push you back to the Norway and Denmark cruise, because the names of those towns, and I'm really happy that you're pronouncing them, are very interesting to listen to. So
I'm probably mutilating them too, but that's okay.
Oh, I have no idea. They sound perfect to me.
There you go.
And I'm really glad that you're saying it and not me. But so as you stop there, are you doing any of the tours? I mean, you did some of the tours and you were able to sneak off and grab a geocache?
Yep. Yeah, that's what I try to do. And we mix it up. Sometimes we do a tour organized for the cruise ship. Sometimes we do a tour organized by a local third party. Or sometimes we leave the ship and we do like one of these hop on, hop off kind of tours, which kind of gives you a lay of the land, and then we decide what we want to do from there. Although I drive my wife crazy because I plan to the nth degree, where if I'll even have a spreadsheet of saying what we're doing when, and I'll even put in a time slot saying spontaneous. So I plan to be spontaneous. So
I want to see how that one works.
she gives me a hard time about that. But
she's not alone. I'm just going to tell.
So it's always difficult. I know when we did the tour, when we were in Garanger and we were on the bus tour, I'm like, okay, the tour bus driver said we have 20 minutes. Can I grab this cache in 20 minutes or not? And that's always because you don't want to miss the bus.
No, exactly. And that's exactly what I was thinking. Is like, if you miss it, you're stuck. You're on your own now.
This not cruise related, but travel related. We took a bus tour of Scotland, go up to Isle of Skye, and although I told the driver that I do geocache and stuff like that, but I don't want to hold up the bus. So he would stop at, for a rest stop or something like that, and I'd say, how long do we have? Oh, about 15 minutes. Thank you. And just run and find it. So.
Right. And are you doing physical geocaches or like virtuals, earth caches?
I'm doing traditionals if it's regular geocaches, because I don't want to spend time for multis. True American.
Sure.
But earth caches and virtuals are really great to do, because sometimes you go to earth caches, a lot of times there's a sign, or you take photos and observation, and you can do that relatively quickly, as long as you read everything ahead of time. Do not do it hot on the spot.
Don't do it by seating your pants and say, okay, here's one, let's try this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, in many cases, you'll also have to do the translation, because they're not even in English or whatever your native language is. So if you don't know, or if you don't have it translated ahead of time, you might have trouble on site because you can't read it. And you know how bad the automatic translations can be too.
Oh yeah. I mean, sometimes before I even leave for the cruise, I kind of look at the earth caches and virtual caches beforehand, just to get an idea. And then usually the night before we arrive in the port, if I think we're going to hit the specific areas, I will really review those earth caches there to try to get it in my mind. So when we get there, it's like, bam, I can just do it fast.
Well, and you're having all this data with you before you get on the boat, right? Because if I look, I think you have both arms and both legs. If I'm not mistaken, Wi-Fi on the ship costs one of those.
It's gotten better, actually. Okay. It's because Royal Caribbean has at least Royal Caribbean, you can get it for about $12 a day now with streaming, even, which is not too bad. It used to be horrendous. But I still like having everything preloaded. I have it either on my GPS, and if I've loaded too many caches, I have it on my laptop or tablet that I can dump it into my GPS on the fly. Because I like going in as much as possible beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's sometimes where I go to a port, it's like, why don't I have that? And then it's like, okay, can I get online and download it really fast? So.
Yeah, okay. You can always do some of that kind of stuff at the airport if you've got the Wi-Fi there.
Or a lot of the ports, you have free Wi-Fi, or you go into an ice cream shop, they have free Wi-Fi as long as you buy something or something like that. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's not too bad.
No, it works out pretty well.
Roger in the chat is saying, don't rely on Google Translate.
Yeah, sometimes it comes up weird.
Yeah.
Sometimes?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was getting at, is you want to make sure before you go that you're doing those translations and making sure it's understandable and makes sense before you try to do it.
Yeah, I've had that. I have that in Japan quite often. So that's kind of weird, but and sometimes even the Japanese they'll use Google Translate and stick it in the HTML in the web page, and you read it like, I have no idea what they're trying to say.
Right. Well, and the nice thing with like Google Translate and what was a Microsoft one called? It's not called Microsoft Translate. It might be. But in any case, they've gotten so much better than they were even a couple of years ago.
Yes.
So if someone had done the automated translation back then, if you run it through now, it's probably going to come up a little bit better than it did then. It's just with geocaching, you've got so much stuff that they just don't understand.
Yep, exactly.
Is that something that you've done, though, was to contact local cachers and see if any of them are native English speakers that could help you out with caches or do a meetup or anything like that?
No, I really haven't. I've never thought about it, actually, but I probably should sometimes. I mean, luckily, with the exception of Japan, most of the cruises, that's the nice thing about cruises. You go to a cruise port, English is usually very well done in those cities, those towns, and even the geocaches, because I know there's going to be a lot of foreign visitors, and a lot of them speak English.
You know what just occurred to me when GSM X2 and the chat was asking what options aside from Google Translate. Is BabelFish still around, and is it still doing well?
I have no idea.
I know Microsoft Translate was supposed to be really good now. Still, people prefer Google Translate, but I thought BabelFish was well, at one point BabelFish was big, but I think they're still around.
Still around. BabelFish.com.
Yeah, I don't think they have an app there, but like Microsoft, I want to say, and Google Translate will have this as well. You can download the dictionaries and actually use it to translate text and photos.
Really? Yeah. Well, I know BabelFish had a piece of software you could buy at one time, and their translation wasn't bad from English to French or French to English. That's what I used it for at the time.
Mm-hmm. The Going Caching event last year had one of the lab caches, I think it was, which used Google Translate, the photo tool, and you'd go scan the different words on the board and translate those for the codes.
Interesting. I use that quite a bit. The Google Translate through the camera where it does the live translation, and it really does quite well.
Does it really?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I use it quite frequently at the Asian market to try to figure out what something is on the shelf.
I've had a international student who happened to be Chinese with us for a couple of years, and bring something home. And he's like, "Well, I don't know the word for. Hold on. Oh, that's seaweed. Yeah,
it's nori."
Or whatever tea. Yeah. What kind of tea is that? I don't know how you say that. Okay. So it's not perfect, but it does a rather good job. It's enough that gets you close.
Yeah, it's good enough that you can get a rough idea, but it might not be enough if you're trying to do something like an Earth cache or a virtual cache. But usually with like the virtual caches, you're looking for names. So even though it can't translate the names, you can find whatever that is on the monument or whatever it is you're going to try.
Right.
Let's get back to Bermuda, though, because I'm a little curious how that one went since you were with Snuggle Muggle and other muggles on that trip.
Yeah, I was with my mom, too. Yeah. So, I mean, that one, we actually took a van tour that went through almost the entire island from tip. It's shaped like a fish hook, and it started at the tip of the fish hook and then went around all the way to the other end. And that one, I told the driver, the tour guide, that specifically that when we're stopping, I'll probably be grabbing some geocache along the way, and she had no problem with that. She knew what geocaching was, mainly because Bermuda actually has official geo tour, which there was no way I could do it, but I did grab some along the way. And my mom just she doesn't care, so and my wife tolerates it, so we did that. And then the next, like I said, the ships actually stayed overnight in Bermuda, which was kind of nice because a hotel in Bermuda is really expensive. It's actually cheaper to be on the ship than to be on land in Bermuda.
Wow.
It's just kind of crazy. So the next morning I got up early to cache along the Bermuda used to have a railroad right away, and I basically took a bus out to a spot on the right of way and walked the trail and grabbing caches along the way, which was really a fun way to do things. It was pretty cool. And I had asked our tour guide the day before, okay, I want to walk this rail trail, and how do I use the buses and stuff like that? And she said, "Oh, it's buses are easy. That's how you do it, and just tell them to get off at this spot." And it's kind of the best part of the trail. So asking locals is always a good thing. Yeah. Even if they don't know about geocaching, they know where to go.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
have you used like Concierge or somebody on the boat to help you say, "Hey, can you read this and translate?" Or, "Hey, this is where I want to go. How do I get there?"
I have asked for maps, and I've asked for help on that.
Okay.
Translate, I usually don't have a problem with that. For some reason, I'm pretty good at that. To me, a map's a map. It's just so if I pull up Google Maps of the geocaches, I usually get an idea of where I want to go anyway before I get there.
Okay. I'm
I was
sorry.
going to say though, I was really love doing those caches by trails, especially like in villages. Not so much in like cities because that's a little bit too many people. But in the villages and stuff, because you really get a better sense of the community too.
Yeah, because this some parts there was nothing around, and then other times it was through backyards practically of places. And the nice thing about this trail, though, at this time of day, that there wasn't very muggles walking by, so geocaching I didn't feel exposed or anything like that. Because that's always the hard part, especially in your foreign countries. Like, what is that guy doing behind the bushes? What is he doing?
And that's why I'd love to hook up with local cachers to do that. Is just you have someone who kind of knows what's going on and is a little less conspicuous.
That's true. Yep.
Right. So, the Panama Canal, the Fords, Bermuda. Where else have you been?
Caribbean.
Ooh.
And that left out of Port Canaveral in Florida, and then we stopped at Nassau, St. Thomas, and St. Maarten. And Nassau, my wife was going to do snorkeling, but a big storm had come through the night before, and the place where she was going to snorkel, that beach was gone, doesn't exist.
Oh,
wow!
Ooh.
So that was canceled. So I was just going to walk around town, but she's like, "Oh, well, what do you want to do?" So we just a local. When you get off the boat, you're hassled with all these people. It's like, come with me. Finally, this one guy that seemed like an older guy. He's like, come with me. I will show you the best. And I said, okay, maybe we'll think about it. And then we walked into the city square. I grabbed a geocache. Then we walked. Then I said, oh, okay, let's just take this guy's tour. It was actually a pretty cool tour. He was actually a real estate agent. And he took us to what they call the slums of Nassau, as well as what they consider the rich areas of Nassau, and of course to Atlantis, which my wife wasn't really interested in going into until I said, no, let's go through it anyway. Because she's like, it's just a casino, a big hotel. And then she saw the Chihuly glass and chandeliers. It's like, okay, we're walking around here.
I didn't know they had Chihuly glass.
Yeah, and inside Atlantis.
Okay.
Yeah. And she loves glass, so that was pretty cool. And then the tour actually took us up top of the hill, and I was able to get an earth cache at the top of the hill, looking over the view, a virtual cache, and then a real cache going down these famous steps that go down into basically just a wide chasm that was hand built, unfortunately, by slaves, but it's still a pretty neat part of Bermuda, just part of its history. St. Thomas, again, my wife had problems with snorkeling because that same storm had hit St. Thomas. We were going to go to St. John's, but they said don't even try, so we didn't. She was able to do snorkeling a different way, and I went with her. There was no geocaches along that way, even though we stopped at an island. But I was able to get one cache at the port to count for St. Thomas. So that all I need is one.
Right. That's true.
And then the last one was St. Maarten, and this is where my wife and I actually separated. She did snorkel on her own, but she had a great time. But I hopped on a jitney bus to go to the French side of the island from the Dutch side. That in itself was an adventure because the bus, as the bus is going around town, people pointing at the tire went flat, and the bus driver finally pulled over. It's like, okay, you got to take the next bus, and realize buses in St. Maarten, they're not regulated, other than they take somewhat of a fixed route. So they're all freelancers. So you just have to wait for the next bus, which one showed up, but got to Margot. And my whole purpose was to get the French side, to get a virtual cache and a real cache, so I can get the French side of St. Maarten as well as the Dutch side. So 2 for 1 on one island. which is
Well,
always
that's
kinda
where you had hit the airport to see the planes too.
That's correct. And from the French side, I went back to Maho Beach, and
Was
that's where
there a cache over that way that people could hit as well, or just
well,
the cool?
there is a cache right at Maho Beach. I'm not sure if it's still there after the big hurricane last year.
Oh, that's right.
Good, but because it's right near the warning sign saying, "Hey, don't get too close because of jet blast."
Right.
People still
Right.
do it anyway because
Oh yeah.
they're wackos. And then I just sat at the pub there that's right by the beach for 3 hours, having some beers and watching planes come in. It's a rough life when you have to do that.
Well, somebody's got it.
Someone's got to do it. Yeah, I did go out to the beach a couple times and I got to the beach when the Air France A340 was coming in. So 4-engine plane, to be right under that's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, the 747s from KLM stopped flying there the month before. It's like, no.
That's a bummer.
But it was still awesome. I don't regret that at all.
Yeah, that would be definitely something I'd want to do when I'm out there, because I've seen the videos and the pictures of it, and it's just, I don't know that I want to go hanging on the guardrail like so many people do.
I saw people doing it, and I saw one of the local airlines. They fly MD-88s or MD-80s, and
Wow.
And so their rear engines are pointed downwards, and these guys purposely hold the brake and go to full power before they release the brakes, and people literally do go vertical hanging on the fence.
Wow.
It's like I'm just thinking they're kicking up all this sand and dirt, and you're going vertical. What, you bunch of idiots.
Well, I just can't imagine how tough it is to even breathe
You can't.
with that much force.
Right.
I mean, I was even on the side. I was on the side, not even behind the plane. I was just on the side near the fence, and it was a 737. And when he pulled full power, it's like I'm getting stuff in my eyes, like, and now I'm not even that close.
Yeah. Goggles for sure, and
Yeah, exactly.
probably some kind of mask.
Exactly. Maybe a hard hat, so when you do fly,
Yeah. Just wear the helmet.
exactly.
Just be done with it.
People will leave you alone. Though.
Oh no, you might get hauled away for being suspicious too.
Exactly.
Wow. Now, are there any countries that you traveled to that you weren't able to get a cache in?
For your cruises, no.
Okay. Well, see, that doesn't give you a reason to have to go back, but okay. Okay.
But that does. I want to. In a couple of years from now, where I'm planning a cruise out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, that will hit St. Maarten again. So
Okay.
we'll be hitting that again.
How about any tips for anyone who's doing one of those Alaska cruises?
Oh well, Alaska cruises are kind of cool because you can actually cache by a train or by a ship, instead of earth caching. So nearly, I think every Alaska cruise stops at Skagway in Alaska, and Skagway has the train that goes up into the hills. And if you go up to Fraser, you have to go all the way up to Fraser though. If you can't, you have to actually go into Canada to this one earth cache. But the only way to get this earth cache is to ride the train, because that's the railroad goes through this sense of what I would call Badlands area, and you have to describe the area, and you can't see it from the road. You can only see it by train.
Okay.
So
How cool!
Now,
is that the one that's a RDC, the rail diesel car?
No, these are narrow gauge. They're pulled by diesel locomotives, but they have the shroud ones. It's the White Pass and Yukon Railway.
Okay, now I know which one that is. Then, yeah. That's one of those that I'd like to try anyway. Just it's a cool scenic railroad.
Oh, it's a beautiful railroad. It's really neat. And I purposely, after the train came back to Skagway and we had lunch, I had downloaded the caches that are by the rail yards specifically. So I had I had two destinations: see the rail yards and get geocaches. And the geocache was actually in an old steam locomotive boiler that was just on the side of the road.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was.
Well, it's just it's just abandoned. It's not like a exhibit or anything.
No, it's just there.
Yeah, because they were running steam up there into like the 70s, if I remember.
Right, and they still have they still run occasional steam, but usually not on days when cruise ships are in port for some reason. So it's meant for true sightseers, not cruisers.
Right. Makes sense. But yeah, it's
on cruise
not
ship
a good environment for that.
Cruise ship day, Skagway has, when we were there was 6 ships in port, and so they're running multiple sections of trains. You say you can't put a steam train amongst that.
No. Steam trains are not the easiest things to run. They take a lot of man hours, and it's just so much more work.
Yep.
To deal with them than it is to do the diesel trains, and they're dirtier.
That's correct.
As I know from climbing inside the boiler.
You're not supposed to do that, right?
Someone had to go in and inspect it.
Yeah, someone inspect them.
Yeah, I had to go in and take photos in the early days of digital. Anyway, now is Seward is the port that has the sunken rail yard. Am I correct?
Sunken rail, maybe. I mean, that is one of the main rail hubs for Alaska's is in Seward.
Yeah, there was that earthquake that dropped the rail yard in like the 40s or something like that.
Oh, probably it was probably Seward. Yeah.
Yeah. So I take it then you have not done that boat tour, but they have the glass bottom boat tours of the rail yard.
No, it did not, because when we got to Seward, we literally kicked off the boat and put on our bus to head up to Denali.
Oh, got it.
But one other thing you need to do on your Alaska cruise before you get off the ship is there's even the round trips from Seattle go up at least one of the fjords for the glaciers. So there's 2 different glaciers set areas that the cruise ships do, and both of them have an earth cache for them. So if you can do an earth cache while on your ship. And what was nice when we had a balcony room, and we could do an earth cache without even getting out of our room.
That's the one that the land monkeys did while they were in a hot tub.
Yes, probably.
Not board the ship. Earth cache from a hot tub. It's not how you do it. Well, maybe it is how you do it.
Maybe it is how you do it. It's kind of awesome to do that, though.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, I'm not even coming up with the right tours. I wonder if they've stopped doing them. So when I did my search for Alaska glass bottom boat sunken railroad or rail yard, I'm not coming up with any in Alaska.
They may not do it anymore because they've done a lot of work on Seward, because it is a big container port as well as a cruise ship port.
Well, and I seem to remember they were having some issues with clearance.
Yeah, they may have dredged it.
Which means there's nothing.
Clearance.
Clearance.
Mm-hmm.
If I just go for Alaska Sunken Railroad, it talks about the portage, Sunken Alaska Ghost Town. That might be it.
If the town's sunken, it better be a ghost town. Unless Aquaman lives there.
See, I was always fascinated by the sunken rail yard.
All righty. So you said your Alaska cruise was one way. How did you get back?
So after the cruise, we like I said, put on a bus, and we stopped in Fairbanks. I mean, not Fairbanks, in Anchorage first for lunch, and then we went up to Denali for a couple of days as part of the tour. And the tour included basically a school bus ride up into Denali National Park. Mm-hmm. Cars are only allowed into a certain part, and then it's only these basically school buses that are allowed to go beyond that. And to see the wildlife and the mountain views. Denali, unfortunately, wasn't out that day, but I was able to get earth caches because there can't be any physical caches in the national park, but they did have earth caches that I could do while the bus is even moving, or some of them were where we were parked to see wildlife, which was kind of awesome. Also, in the main visitors area of the park, there's many earth caches. I wasn't able to grab them all because of time, but if you like earth caches, Denali is a great place to go.
Oh, nice.
And then after that, we were put on a train to go up to Fairbanks, and the train included dinner, and it was about a 4 or 5 hour train trip from Denali up to Fairbanks, and the views from the train were awesome. And then we had dinner, and I'm not a big halibut fan, but I selected the halibut, and it was the best piece of fish I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
And my wife had, I forget what she had, but she said her food was the best she ever had. It was literally, I mean, both of us still to this day say that was probably the best restaurant food we ever had, and it was all run by kids. It was basically the seasonal workers. They were all teenagers or late or young 20s.
It's impressive.
It was impressive. And then Fairbanks, we had more tours up in Fairbanks. We took a paddle wheeler tour.
Nice.
Then we took a gold dredge tour, and we were able to do some caches on that. But after that, then we rented a car because I wanted to go to North Pole, Alaska to see Santa Claus. But he was off that day, though. It was very sad.
I don't think he's allowed days off.
No, that's what I thought. But he has geocaches.
Well, there you go. Gifts for everyone.
And then I got a virtual for the Alaska Pipeline, which is my most northerly geocache now. Is that one? I specifically did that. It's like, that's going to be my most northerly. I know it.
Nice.
But I know that you've got some other travels coming up. You mentioned the one, but another that you hinted at in our show notes here is that you're going to be going to New Zealand and Alaska for a cruise.
New Zealand and Australia.
Or Australia, sorry. Yes.
Yep. Next year, we're taking plane tickets are bought now, so I'm committed now. So we're flying to Sydney, and then we'll be in Sydney for a few days. Then we hop on a cruise ship that'll go around New Zealand. And it hits stops at both North and South Island, and it's a 13-day cruise, and then comes back to Sydney. And then we're going to pop on a flight to go up to Cairns to see the Great Barrier Reef, and then fly down to Melbourne, where we'll spend the last few days because Melbourne has the largest tram system in the world. So I have to go to Melbourne. Sorry, it's a rule.
It's a rule. As long as your wife puts up with it, then you can do it.
I make sure that there's something on it. She's actually kind of excited because I pointed out in Melbourne there's a restaurant tram. So you board a tram and you get dinner on it. So she's like, I'm good with that.
Interesting.
And she likes streetcars. She likes streetcars anyway because she loves architecture, and you can see architecture from the streetcars.
That should be a fun trip. What are you planning for caching and for the gear that you're going to take?
Well, I don't want to rely on my phone at all because of data use on land. Although I could cache offline with my phone, but I prefer bringing my GPS. I have a Garmin Map 62 that'll preload with all the geocaches or where we're going to go, and also have a backup of all the Pocket Queries or any other downloads I have on my laptop and or tablet. I'm lucky I have a tablet that actually has a USB port that I can dump caches into my GPS, which is kind of nice. And I'll be planning every cruise port and every place we're going to go. We're going to go to Hobbiton, where they filmed the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and there's a geocache outside of the perimeter. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to it or not. It depends on how long the tour will allow me to do that. Because I also want to actually enjoy the land. Sometimes it's not all about geocaching. I know.
In that case,
you're actually Yeah.
It's not always about geocaching. It's not always about trains. Just mostly about geocaching, mostly about trains.
Well,
it's all about what the wife wants to do and keeping her happy.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
correct. A happy wife, happy life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But getting back to the planning, are you actually going through and cherry picking caches, or are you just doing the big mass dump of Pocket Query with all the traditionals, earth caches, and virtuals?
Good question. I always do the pocket. I do the massive dump, but what I do then is after I do that, I specifically cherry pick ones that I my priority caches of the ones I really want to get, and then everything else is just if I have time or cache of opportunity, I'll grab those.
Mm-hmm.
But I always try to find like a larger one so it travel bug trade is possible. It's always a good one, or if it has a certain theme that I want, like trains, it'll be grabbed. So
nice.
It's not mostly about trains. Okay, yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. And some geocaching.
Yes, I have had to prioritize my hobbies because I've tried to do all of them at the same time, and I get frustrated. So then I'd say, well, trains are going to win, then geocaching, then everything else.
Interesting. Okay.
All right. I think we should probably wrap it up. But before we do, can you kind of talk about how you're handling the logging of the caches?
Yeah, so that's always the harder part. Finding them is easier. Sometimes logging them takes a while. I try to log them as quickly as I can, but in order to do them in order, the earth caches answering questions offline, I will hold back actually logging until I get all my everything in order for the virtuals and earth caches, so I can make sure I try to log them in order. So sometimes I'll do it on the ship if I have internet access, or it waits till I get home. So it could be 24 hours, or it could be 2 weeks. So
wow,
mainly because I'm kind of OCD. I like doing them in order.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
No. Are you using the field notes in the GPSR, or are you still doing that on the phone?
So I use the GPSR to say that I found it. I try to keep mental notes of it. I'm starting to use field notes now on my phone, which is kind of nice. I'm doing that more and more. And if I'm using the geocaching app, which is what I typically do, I save it as all drafts, so I can edit it later.
Sure. And I don't think we mentioned it for anyone who knows or doesn't know, you're on Android, and your typical caching app, as I recall, was GioLife.
Yeah, GioLife, which I've been using GioLife. Then last weekend I was doing geocaching. I got frustrated with GioLife and I switched to geocaching app. So it was just one of those things. I think there was an update, so I have to learn how to do something again.
I totally understand how that happens.
And the geocaching app's actually getting better and better. So can't really complain about too much.
Mm-hmm. And they're getting pretty good at doing the offline map tiles and that kind of stuff too.
Yep. And that's what I do try to do is now is I try to download Google Maps the area I'm going to if it allows it. I found in Japan, it won't allow me to download Google Maps in Japan.
Yeah, because I don't think they own their own maps over there. They're still using a third-party service.
That's annoying.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking last week that Cachly has dropped support for the Google Map tiles because they have to pay a fortune to use those. So we're back at this same point we were, 5 years ago, I think, when
something like that. Yeah.
Switched. And a lot of the games and whatnot have gotten hit by this apparently too. I heard something about it just the other day on a different podcast, talking about the games have either had to switch or are shutting down because of the expense of the Google Map tiles. In any case, thank you very much, Mark, for joining us again and giving us a little bit more insight on cruise caching.
No problem. Hopefully it was helpful.
Always.
And thank you to all of the new patrons and all of the old patrons as well. and to several of you who have upped your donations. We look forward to seeing you on the YouTube Hangout on Air Tuesday night. That's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. Watch your Patreon feed for the link to join the show.
Yes, that's on Tuesday. But following that, on Thursday, we're going to do another show. I mean, that's 2 this week. Or next week, actually. Yeah, I know. And still for the same low price. Now, next week, we're going to do regional caching organizations with GeoMonkey Tiger. He's got the exclamation point. You have to raise your voice. And Merlin 1392 of the Michigan Geocaching Association. After that, on July 5th, we're doing conversions with GMS times 2.
Converting to what?
You're going to have to find out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've been told it's not religious conversions.
Okay.
So maybe Android into Apple and Apple into Android. Those kind of conversions. Apple to PC.
That could be religious for some people.
Oh, yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? July 12th, we're talking about friendships with Cowboy Bebop and lobotomy. Now, I don't think Cowboy Bebop has had a lobotomy, but anyway.
That's a strange friendship.
Yeah. And finally, on July 19th, we're doing another Cache Tour. Cache Tour. No.
Cache Tour.no.
It's CacheTour.no. With R. Reagan and Plato Addict.
Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more of the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link in our show notes to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Offenauer and Daryl Waddenberg. This show is copyright 2018 by Daryl Waddenberg. All rights reserved.
Cache with the Cachemaniacs.